Egoism by John Beverley Robinson. There is no word more generally misinterpreted than the word egoism in its modern sense. In the first place, it is supposed to mean devotion to self-interest without regard to the interests of others. It is thus opposed to altruism, devotion to others and sacrifice of self. This interpretation is due to the use of the word thus antithetically by Herbert Spencer. Again, it is identified with hedonism or Epicureanism, philosophies that teach that the attainment of pleasure or happiness or advantage, whichever you may choose to phrase it, is the rule of life. Modern egoism is propounded by Stirner and Nietzsche and expounded by Ibsen, Shaw, and others is all of these, but it is more. It is realization by the individual that he is an individual, that as far as he is concerned, he is the only individual. For each one of us stands alone in the midst of the universe. He is surrounded by sights and sounds which he interprets as exterior to himself, although all he knows of them are the impressions on his retina and eardrums and other organs of sense. The universe for him is measured by these sensations. They are, for him, the universe. Some of them he interprets as denoting other individuals, whom he conceives as more or less like himself. But none of these is himself. He stands apart. His consciousness and the desires and gratifications that enter into it is a thing unique. No other can enter into it. But egoism is more than this. It is the realization by the individual that he is above all institutions and all formulas, that they exist only so far as he chooses to make them his own by accepting them. When you see clearly that you are the measure of the universe, that everything that exists for you only, so far as it is reflected in your own consciousness, you become a new man. You see everything by a new light. You stand on a height and feel the fresh air blowing on your face and find new strength and glory in it. Whatever gods you worship, you realize that they are your gods, the product of your own mind, terrible or amiable as you may choose to depict them. You hold them in your hand and play with them, as a child with its paper dolls, for you have learned not to fear them, that they are but the imaginations of your heart. All the ideals which men generally think are realities you have learned to see through. You have learned that they are your ideals, whether you have originated them, which is unlikely, or have accepted somebody else's ideals, makes no difference. They are your ideals, just so far as you accept them. The priest is revered only so far as you reverence him. If you cease to reverence him, he is no longer reverend for you. You have the power to make and unmake priests as easily as you can make and unmake gods. You are the one of whom the poet tells, who stands unmoved, though the universe fall in fragments about you. And all the other ideals by which men are moved, to which men are enslaved, for which men afflict themselves, have no power over you. You are no longer afraid of them, for you know them to be your own ideals, made in your own mind for your own pleasure, to be changed or ignored, just as you choose to change or ignore them. They are your own little pets to be played with, not to be feared. The state, or the government, unquote, is idealized by many as a thing above them, to be reverenced and feared. They call it my country, unquote. And if you utter the magic words, they will rush to kill their friends, whom they would not injure by so much as a pin scratch, if they were not intoxicated and blinded by their ideal. Most men are deprived of their reason under the influence of their ideals. Moved by the ideal of religion or patriotism or morality, they fly at each other's throats, they who are otherwise often the gentlest of men. But their ideals are for them like the fixed ideas of lunatics. They become irrational and irresponsible under the influence of their ideals. They will not only destroy others, but they will sink their own interests and rush madly to destroy themselves as a sacrifice to an all-devouring ideal. Curious, is it not, to one who looks on with a philosophical mind? But the egoist has no ideals, for the knowledge that his ideals are only his ideals frees him from their domination. He acts for his own interest, not for the interest of ideals. He will neither hang a man nor whip a child in the interest of morality, if it is disagreeable for him to do so. He has no reverence for the state. He knows that the government is but a set of men, mostly as big fools as he is himself, many of them bigger. If the state does things that benefit him, he will benefit. If it attacks him and encroaches on his liberty, he will evade it by any means in his power. If he is not strong enough to withstand it, he is a man without a country. The flag that most men adore, as men always adore symbols, worshipping the symbol more than the principle it is supposed to set forth, is for the egoist but a rather inharmonious piece of patchwork. And anybody may walk on it or spit on it, if they will, without exciting his emotion any more than if it were a tarpaulin that they walked upon or spat upon. The principles that it symbolizes he will maintain so far as it seems to his advantage to maintain them. But if the principles require him to kill people or be killed himself, you will have to demonstrate to him just what benefit he will gain by killing or being killed before you can persuade him to uphold them. When the judge enters court in his toggery, judges and ministers and professors know the value of toggery in impressing the populace. The egoist is unterrified. He has not any respect for the law, unquote. If the law happens to be to his advantage, he will avail himself of it. If it invades his liberty, he will transgress it as far as he thinks it wise to do so. But he has no regard for it as a thing supernal. It is to him the clumsy creation of them who still sit in darkness, unquote. And for all the other small, tenuous ideals with which we have fettered our minds and to which we have shrunk our petty lives, they are for the egoist as though they were not. In brief, egoism in its modern interpretation is the antithesis not of altruism, but of idealism. The ordinary man, the idealist, subordinates his interest to the interest of his ideals and usually suffers for it. The egoist is fooled by no ideals. He discards them or uses them as may suit his own interest.